I call it the Chad principle because in college I had a good friend named Chad who would surely pull me into a long, stimulating conversation. More often than not, it would mean I wasn't getting my homework done or any kind of project or chore that I needed to get done. Instead, I was in those conversations, wrapped in the moment. But those conversations often transformed me more than my homework ever did. And to this day, I invoke the Chad principle anytime I need to remember the importance of those human conversations, even when there seems like there's other obligations or responsibilities, because conversations can truly be sacred. And that's the focus of today's episode. Today on the show, we have Mattson. He's a writer, a speaker, and a founder of Between, an inclusive global faith community helping people embrace curiosity, conversation, and sacred connection. With decades of experience growing cause-based organizations, Matt has helped thousands rediscover the divine in everyday relationships. His latest book, Cathedrals of Connection, offers a gentle invitation to experience God through honest human conversations. So stay tuned to talk to Matt. I'm Jake Doberenz, and this is Christianity Without Compromise, a podcast for Christians who love Jesus but are tired of culture war faith. Now, let's get to rebuilding a faith that actually looks like Jesus. Mattson, it is great to have you on Christianity Without Compromise today.
Man, Jake, first of all, I just want to say, Christianity Without Compromise, I would like to just talk for the next hour or so about that title because it is, without compromise, is such a beautiful invitation. To invite somebody to consider what does it mean to live fully in what your faith means for you is permission giving, man. That is a really beautiful thing. So anyway, hi, Jake. I'm glad to be here with you. Really glad to be here with you.
No, thanks. I'm glad you like the title. It's actually the third title we've had for the show.
Nice.
And we're not even that old, but I've changed the title a lot because I can, and I'm allowed to do that. It's legal.
Jake, that tells me a lot about you, that you changed your title multiple times. That tells me you have a learning and growth mindset. That tells me that you are here to serve. You are not here to prove a point that you tried to make a while ago. You are that's actually really cool. What a cool characteristic of a show. Yeah.
Well, as I mentioned to you beforehand, I mean, kind of my day job is podcast producing. So I'm always tweaking things and what's the right formula. And there isn't a right way to do anything, honestly, but there's some better practices. And so trying to find that. I kind of liked it too. And it worked as an alliteration. So, I love alliterations. So
well, as the author of Cathedrals of Connection, which you were about to tell everybody about, I am a fan. I'm on your side, man. I'm absolutely on your side.
Yes. So, I do want to start out with learning more about you by talking about one of the stories that you have in that aforementioned book. At one point, you were asked, "Are you a believer?" And I very much related to kind of getting a peek in your mind here, sort of the overthinking, maybe the nuancing that, and I very much relate to that. But can you just kind of take us back to that and kind of what that reveals about your approach to faith, to connection, all of that? That's how we're going to get the ball rolling today.
Yeah, Jake, I love that question. Thanks, and thanks for honoring the overcomplication of my mind running really fast in any social interaction when other people would just respond with a yes or a no and move on. I, of course, had to make that the most complicated moment, so much so that I would take it years later, put it in one of the opening chapters of a book that I released. So I remember that story well. I was at a speaking engagement for a national event for this big service-based organization, a really big, cool international service-based organization. I'd delivered a talk, and now we were going to a luncheon, And a guy came up to me, as I remember it. A guy came up to me and was, he was just like, "Hey, just a quick question, just a quick question. Are you a believer?" And he when he asked that question, I knew that I could not answer it correctly. And I like this feels important because you're right. It probably does reveal a lot about me, but I knew immediately
Mm.
I couldn't answer it correctly. If I said the answer of what I believe, he would have been very dissatisfied. If I had said another truth, yes, I'm a believer. I'm a Christian. I absolutely believe. He would have only understood my answer from his perspective, from his point of view, from his understanding of what it might mean to quote unquote be a believer, quote unquote be a Christian. And so I found myself probably, I don't remember what I wrote in the book, but I found myself dancing around the moment
Mm.
and really feeling conflicted about this, what should seem like a pretty simple question, especially for a guy who now works in ministry and puts out a faith book that has a Bible verse at the
Mm.
beginning of every chapter of the book. So that question of, are you a believer? I believe sets up a checkbox mindset, sets up a A, B, you're either in or you're out. And it's actually one of my favorite questions to ask with some of the faith leaders in my life, some of my mentors, some of my spiritual mentors. I love to ask them, do you think I'm a Christian yet? And they'll always laugh at me
Mm.
and push back. And their answer is always, of course, Matt, of course. But I'm always asking the question in the context of this complicated world we live in, Jake. Who gets to decide if I'm in or out? Who gets to decide if I'm good enough or not? What is the oath that I have to take, and how often do I have to take it? And do I have to what is the prayer I have to say? And I know some people actually have answers to that. But for me, I feel like the moment we put God in a checkbox, we have taken God out of God. We have just completely missed the point. And I know that confronts people, that point of view challenges people, but that's part of, I don't know any other way to do it. And so the way I respond is say, I want to invite people to a conversation with me. Every conversation with me, I want to start it by letting them know I am deeply uncertain. I do not know anything for sure, but I would love to know how you see the world. And I think that takes us closer to some truth, Jake.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, we live in a world, right, where we have these sort of communication rituals of, I say, "How are you doing?" and you say, "Good," and then we
Yeah.
move on, right? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
that's the ritual we had prescribed already. But there's something more powerful in the further conversation that cannot just be captured with a yes or no, because like that particular person set up a yes or no, but it's so much more than that. And I appreciate it. And that's why I want to start with that, because it leads into kind of everything I want to talk about. We get to know you, particularly Matt, and how you think, which, like I said, very similar to what goes on in my brain. And we get to also remember, conversations like they're like, let's go deeper here, and I think that's really important. And I know you think that too, because you wrote a book about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Very much so. Yeah.
But before we kind of get into maybe more of the prescriptive side of thing, if you will, I kind of want to talk about just the way the world typically works. Like I just mentioned, there's that "How are you? I'm good." Like there's that sort of ritual that we do, but a lot of the world is isolated, lonely. I mean, like a while ago, like the Surgeon General said, this is like a pandemic of loneliness or epidemic of loneliness. Like this is a big problem. We're politically divided. Uh, the technology has divided us in the same ways as united us in different way. Like the world's disconnected. Like that's the short answer here. So I would just invite you to kind of weigh in on this. Why is it so easy for us to be isolated and to avoid those moments of connection, and for us not to like want to go past the "How are you? I'm good" kind of thing?
Yeah. So I was just, Jake, sometimes do you feel like you get conversations mixed up in your mind? So today I've had 3 or 4 like intense conversations. And I started my morning actually with a pastor who I didn't know. We met over coffee and we ended up in this intense, beautiful conversation. And so I want to keep straight what I'm talking about with you and what I talked about with him. But in that conversation I had with him this morning, he was just such a cool, deep conversation. Again, we never met. We didn't have a reason to meet, really. We just thought we should get to know each other. And we sat down in 1 hour at a Starbucks. Like, it got pretty intense and pretty real. And in that conversation, I remember talking to him about this idea of all the great faith traditions of the world. I think in general, if we look at the overarching story of the message of these great faith traditions, there's one way to see all of them that suggests that they are all pointing in one direction. They're all pointing us toward each other. That maybe the reason faith emerged out of the human experience is because we felt ourselves drifting away from one another. And so we, in our spirits, long for each other so deeply that we needed to put language, and I'll say the word myth, and don't overcomplicate that, but we needed to attach myth and legend and language and story and parable to this feeling of separation that our spirits were just starting to ache because of. And we had to name this thing God, this thing. We had to name it and understand it and wrestle with it, because it was pointing us back toward each other. It was like this massive confrontation, saying, no, you're disconnected from the vine, to borrow from that language, right? The moment you walk away from each other, the moment we start seeing each other as abstractions, the moment we start seeing each other as other, we have drifted away from the truth, the capital T truth. And all of these faith traditions are all a response to that drifting away from each other. And they're pushing us back. And so if we look at the great history, the great arc of the human experience, that long, long story, there are all these moments of when we started agriculture, and then when societies take place, and then like all these great moments of 150,000 years at the very least of recorded history, and then the Industrial Revolution and technology and AI, like all this stuff is happening so rapidly fast, and all of it is pulling us apart. And so this is part of also why I believe faith, new ways to talk about faith, is so relevant today, Jake. The reason you're called to bring out a podcast right now, you've studied the Bible so intensely, is because we need it now more than ever, because we're more and more divided. So anyway, I knew I was going to conflate conversations I've had today and get confused. I barely remember the question you asked me, Jake, but that is I've really been thinking about this idea all day today, especially that God is just God in whatever language and in whatever faith tradition. God is pointing us back toward each other. And when we see each other again, we'll understand God again. You know, the man asked Jesus, what is the greatest of these commandments, right? What's the most important thing? Or like, of all these commandments, all these rules that you say you still follow, you say you're still okay with, which is the greatest of these? And in at least one translation of the Bible, Jesus's answer is, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul. And like that, the first commandment is, and like that, love your neighbor. Almost like building a bridge between the two and connecting and saying, if you love your neighbor, you love God. Like, if you love your neighbor, you love God. It's the same thing he's saying, which is controversial in some circles to say that. But man, that is enlivening to me, Jake. That gives me clear direction. It teaches me what this faith is meant to have me do, and that is get closer to you and to understand you and to listen to you and to connect with the raw truth underneath all the stuff that we bring with us all the time. So I don't know if I have no idea what the question even was, Jake, but that was where I am right now in my mind.
Well, we're just here to have a conversation, Matt. Like, it's okay. Well, you helped us by giving a historical view of the forces that are pushing us apart and the forces that can push us together. And in your book, you call the space between two people in conversation, you call that the simplest church on earth, right? So tell us more about this conversation, this connection that you are so passionate about, and why that's not just a nice thing for humans to have, but something holy and sacred. So talk more about that part.
Yeah, that line, "the simplest church on earth," that was the original subtitle of the book. And my publisher is good at marketing and knows how to sell books, and knew that you probably didn't want the word church in that particular spot on this particular book. If you wanted it to meet the audience that the book is really meant for, right? I mean, this book is certainly meant for believers and really faithful people who attend a local church and are deeply into their faith. And it's an invitation for people who are people like who I was, I don't know, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, spiritual and curious, but not at all interested in being a part of institutional church for any number of reasons. I don't show up with a story of church hurt, church trauma, church, any of that stuff. But I know a whole lot of people who do. And I know that walking in the doors of a cathedral, of a built church, has so much baggage that it's just not worth it. And I want to create an invitation for people who have church trauma or church hurt, or people like me who are just disenchanted by institutional church early on, disenchanted by the way faith was presented to me, that I just, for decades of my life, just ignored the whole spiritual part of my being. And there are so many people out there like that. You know that, Jake. And so I wanted to create a book that was an invitation for people to know that they can know God. They can explore faith. They can have deep spiritual formation at a coffee shop with a friend the moment they see that is a sacred space, that there is a way to encounter God in that space. And so that idea of the simplest church on earth feels like an invitation that I never got until, the truth is, I ended up getting it from a pastor friend of mine who, when I started going to a church, the church experience, like the Sunday worship experience, I was like, this is nice. It's okay. But I would go out to coffee with him and we would critique church. We would critique like all of it. Like we would get into it. We would get our hands dirty and get messy around it. And that became the true cathedral that transformed me. The true cathedral in which I felt a baptism of truth, a baptism of spirit that I just never could find in maybe the institutional ways that faith had been presented to me or that I had been invited in the past.
I relate to that a lot. I mean, I've never had a period in my life where I kind of gave up on church, if you will, or things of that nature. But to your point, like I hear all the stories. We have those conversations on this podcast all the time. That's not part of my story, but in recent, I don't know, last 10 years, if that's recent, it's been a lot of, church has been taking a different role, I suppose, in my life. And I appreciate the moments of conversations, things. And I've often said, like, sometimes the most spiritual conversations are like Sunday lunch at a Mexican restaurant with tortilla chips and queso. That's where I get invigorated by the conversation and things. Where, yeah, the pastor gave me a nice 25-minute sermon. It was nice and stuff. The singing was cool, but yeah, I'm with you 100%. The conversations are always where I have felt most alive. I often wish churches were more around that kind of, in that kind of environment, or around a table, which is extremely biblical and things of that nature.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. That would be my dream,
I think Jake, there are people who have me. When I say there are people, I am the people that I'm talking about. But there are people who have sometimes thought that in order to have a spiritual conversation, I have to A, be a biblical expert like you are. B, I've got to use Christian language. I've got to use Christian. I have to speak in Christianese, right? I have to say things that a lot of people who aren't deeply into faith would hear and be like, that kind of sounds crazy, man. Like I know it means something to you, and I don't, not out of disrespect, but that language from my context is crazy talk. Like it's just weird. Like it doesn't make any sense to me because it's a different language. It's a different understanding. At some point, people of faith, I think, get so deep into the metaphor that they can't talk about their own faith with people who aren't deep in the metaphor with them. Right.
Oh yeah.
And that becomes a challenge. And so the reason I say that is to say the Mexican restaurant on Sunday afternoon over a couple of margaritas and some chips and salsa can be faithful, can be deeply spiritual. And we don't even have to say Jesus. We don't have to end every sentence with "in Jesus' name" over margarita. You know what I mean? Like it can still be, I want to invite people to know that these moments of connection, these moments of regular human togetherness are not just nice. If we see them for what they might really be, I think we'll see that they're everything. I think we'll see that they are the kingdom that is available to us. That's it. Like that's it. I really believe. And once we start to see it, by the way, once we start to see that, then every interaction transforms. It is lit in a different way. It is, when we see it as holy, it becomes holy. Similar to like when we walk into a church, you walk into a church the first time, you act a little different, you dressed up a little different, you say different words, you're in a different posture. The same thing happens, I think, when we start to name the interaction with the barista at the local coffee shop that we had for 30 seconds. When we start to name that as holy, suddenly we look different, they look different, and the entire interaction takes on a meaning that most people most people miss. And I think that's at the heart of what I'm trying to do.
Yeah. I mean, to me, this is the answer to the question that I've had a lot of. I mean, just if you do the math on like going to church, like just physically going to a church, it's like something like 2% of our week. Like, and that's if you're like a super Christian, you go on Sundays and like a Wednesday night because you're like really holy and stuff.
Yeah.
Like that's like barely anything in our week. And for a lot of people, we just treat that as like, those are the moments to be Christian or something like that. And then, yeah, we don't like, cheat on our taxes or something like we say like, oh, well, I God is through with me the rest of the week and things like that. But I like what you're saying in case is like step one is open your eyes. Like, the spirituality isn't just, chained to the podium at church or something like that. It's around us. This is the answer to the issue of, well, only 2% of our lives matter to God. Like that's the only part we actually give to God. No, it's everything. There are these other moments. And yeah, I believe that God shows up in all those moments. God isn't just at the church or something of that nature. Yeah.
Is it okay if I add maybe, let me say this to the listener out there who is listening to me talk and is like, is this guy like just anti-church? Is that no, like, no, not at all. Actually, right. I serve on the staff of a local church. That's not even my home church. I go to my home church, then I go to this other church where I serve on a staff, and I sometimes serve a third church, and I preach in churches in my area. I love local church. I mean, I actually really believe in it. It's a beautiful thing. I just know that it's not for everybody. And I've started to just reframe what church is. Church is not the holy place. Church is the backstage locker room. It's the place where we go to get a pep talk every once in a while before we go back out onto the field where the real church is. And I like that might sound cliche. I don't know, but like, and I'm not trying to set up church as a battle, go win the game. Like, so skip that part of the metaphor, but like the locker room where I get a pep talk, so that it's just a place where we go and rest on Sunday before we go back to the real church and go back to creating cathedrals of connection in every interaction of our life. For me, that's inspiring. It's super challenging. It makes all the things that I thought were holy just practice for the thing that actually is holy. Like that's the way that I've sort of reframed that. Don't overthink that comment. I'm not saying that going to a confessional booth isn't holy, or going to a grotto, or even going into the woods on a hike and feeling God's breath. No, I love those. I love those things too. And I think so much of our individual prayer and worship and faith formation life is about preparing us for the next interaction we have, because it's in that interaction where we get to deliver the goods. We get to deliver the good news. And I don't mean we get to ask people to be saved by Jesus Christ. I mean, deliver the good news that we're not alone. That we're not alone, that we're here with each other, and love is present with us. All right, Jake, I'm rambling now, but thanks for letting me play a little bit.
No, I'm really glad you mentioned that, because I'm in the same boat. I agree. Like, local church is good. We're definitely not anti that on this show at all. We had an episode last December specifically all about why it's good to show up at church and things of that nature. And there's sociological benefits, there's spiritual benefits, obviously, but your framing is so important. In fact, I just wrote in mid-January a Substack article in my newsletter, Smashing Idols, where I questioned some of our dependence on spiritual disciplines. And my argument was similar to what you said. Sometimes we focus so much on the practicing and not on the doing part. Like, awesome, you read your Bible every day and you pray every day. That's not bad, but like, that should lead to something. Like, that's not the holiness. That's not the end of the story. Those spiritual disciplines should lead to something else. I think that's important to underline and circle and highlight and all of that.
Man.
So
thank
you. I would love if you could just kind of help us with so what do I do now? Like, how do we go about and create these cathedrals of connections? You've talked about just opening our eyes and seeing that holiness that's already there. But what do you suggest for us to make this an important practice in our lives, to make this just a part of the daily rhythms and existence? How do we do this?
Yeah, I think the first, maybe the first piece of advice I'd offer is actually about a spiritual practice. It's about maybe turn to your understanding of faith, turn to your Bible, the sacred text that means something to you, turn to your spiritual community, and ask this question and consider it and contemplate it. What does all this have to teach me about how I should be with the next person I encounter? I'm saying that to say it probably wasn't until 10 years ago, maybe less, that I really did that. And I'll tell you a real story. This will be vulnerable. We had been going to a local church that is my current home local church. And, we'd gotten involved there, and I'm a professional speaker by trade. I had done that for a long time in different settings, and I'd grown pretty close with our senior pastor, and he invited me to preach, like to be a guest preacher in our church, which was a huge honor and like meant so much to me. And it was as a speaker, like, that was fun. Like, that's fun. Yeah. Like, it was just wonderful. So I did, and I essentially. I prepared, not in the way a normal preacher would prepare. I prepared by asking the question, is this thing that I already know a lot about, human connection? I would call it social excellence. Back in the day, I used to teach a thing like connecting with people really, really well. Is that biblical? I just asked that question. Is that biblical? Can I find it in the Bible? And I'm not a Bible scholar. I really wasn't very good at knowing even how to open my Bible and find an answer to a question at that point in my life. But I asked, is this idea, deep, meaningful, important human connection, let's call it social excellence, is that biblical? And I actually just found it the other day. I wrote like a blog that not many people read, but I wrote a blog that was me processing my answer to that question. I had found like 4 examples of like, oh yeah, this story looks like a story of human connection. This story does. And I was really proud of that. And I delivered a really nice sermon, and I still am proud of the sermon. But when I look back at that now, Jake, I can't read the Bible without finding the answer on nearly every page, without finding human connection as the point in nearly every story. I was just having this conversation with the pastor I talked about this morning about of like all these Old Testament stories of just judges and a person rises to lead the Israelites and fails, and there's war and destruction, and it's horror. Like, it's just violent. Like some of those chapters, it's rough, man. Like, it is just about terrible, violent wars and battles and failure, human failure. And I can't look at that anymore and see, I no longer see stories, individual stories of battles and war and violence. I now see an arc of a story that says, look at all the ways we tried to divide, and look at how often it didn't work. And look at how God was always slowly pushing us back toward each other. Like, even those stories, look like they're pointing us toward each other. Every story starts to look like it points us toward each other. And so I offer to the listener, yes, sometimes when we go searching for an answer in the Bible, we'll read an answer we want to find. And so I acknowledge that maybe I look at in fact, definitely, I look at biblical stories through biased eyes, through a particular angle. Absolutely. And man, it's there. Like that truth seems to keep coming back to me, that we're just being pointed back to each other. And I always figure, if I have a choice between reading the Bible looking for reasons to be shamed and guilted, or reading the Bible and looking for unconditional love, and I can read it in both ways and find the answers to both questions, I'm going to go ahead and pick the love one, because I only have this one life. I'm going to pick the one that I want. So anyway, Jake, I think that's my take in that direction.
Yeah, I like that. I do like that. That's important to remember. I do have a last question for you that everybody gets, that I'll give you in a second here, but we're at the point in the podcast where, we could probably talk for hours and hours, especially if we were in a Starbucks, I imagine, but we're not, unfortunately. And I do want to give you a chance to kind of talk about all the things that you're working on. Obviously, you have this book, you have a podcast too. Tell us about all the places and send us to all of those places. Tell us the plugs and the links and that kind of fun stuff.
Yeah. Okay. I'll start with the logistics, right? So if you're listening right now, I want to invite you to pull out your phone or jump on your laptop and go to cathedralsofconnection.com. So obviously, Jake, thanks for inviting me on. Thanks for letting me talk about the book for a little while. I'm pretty proud of this book. Yeah. I'm excited to have a book out in the world. It's a big deal. And part of the job of writing a book is sharing that book's story with people through podcasts and through anything else. So cathedralsofconnection.com. But when you're there, you can obviously buy the book or buy 100 copies of the book. Anyway, you could also scroll down and you'll find stuff about me, like my bio. But in my bio, you're going to see links to a couple of things. One of them that I want to tell you about, Jake, is this ministry that I've been leading for the last 3 years. It's called Between. And Between is entirely focused on that idea that the space between us is sacred. And the ministry came before the book. The book is absolutely an expression of the ministry that I've been running, which is a global, highly inclusive ministry that, we got people all over the planet that are subscribed and participating in different ways, and they participate in some of our online stuff. We've got local chapters forming of Between all around the country. And all of this is about the question of what's the intersection of your faith and human connection. And it's a ministry entirely about that lives at that intersection between your faith, whatever you're bringing to the table, and human connection. And it asks, what does your faith tradition have to teach all of us today about how we can be better when we show up to the next person we encounter? And that question alone, like that invitation alone, and we built this ministry in a pretty cool way. And I think it's a compelling question that feels really relevant in a moment that is very lonely, very divided, and very disconnected. And so, so between.church is the ministry. Cathedralsofconnection.com is where you find the book and more about me and more about, all the stuff that we're doing there.
Beautiful. Love it. That's great. Definitely want to encourage people to look at all that stuff. The ministry, the book, of course. Those are all good stuff. We love to support our guests. And we have a very good community at supporting our guests, I will say. So not to toot my own horn, but let me tell you about my listeners. They buy books.
Yeah,
So,
Jake. I love your listeners already. I love them so much.
Yeah, I know. Exactly. So cool. Could check that out. Yeah, I wish we had more time to talk. I mean, I could talk longer because I host this podcast, but I'm not going to.
Let's not subject your listeners
yeah. That's not our format. Sorry, but I do have one last question that I try to ask every single guest. I'm going to read it exactly as I've written it, and I want you to leave us with this last practical action, something we can do this week. Okay, so here's the question. As we close, leave the audience with just one practical action they can do this week to live out their faith fully for Jesus.
Wow. Okay. So you asked practical, so I'm gonna stay practical. I'm gonna not give you a sermon on philosophy right now. I'm gonna stay practical. Take responsibility for creating the next moment you find yourself in. Take responsibility for at least co-creating the next moment you find yourself in. I think something. If I read the stories of Jesus's ministry in particular, what you see is a preacher wandering the dusty roads of the time and place, and in every one of the stories, of course, these are written later and they're written to talk about somebody's hero, but the way we tell the stories about Jesus is he shows up and transforms the dynamic of the moment. Yeah, he transforms the people, he performs miracles, but look at the stories through the lens of, do you see how he takes control of the moment? He creates it. He says, I am responsible for this space and time, and I am going to fill it with love. I am going to create this will be a plug for the book on accident, but I'm going to create a cathedral around us. I'm going to build a metaphorical chapel around everybody who is here with us right now. And I'm going to fill that space with love, and we will be transformed by that love. I offer, Jake, that we can each do that exact same thing with the barista at the coffee shop, with the person who helps you with the automatic checkout lane at the grocery store, with your grandma who you go visit, with your kids at the dinner table, with your significant other, with your pastor after church, with the person sitting next to you on the bus, with your best friend who you've talked to for a long time, but there's another level deeper that you can create. You can take responsibility for creating that next moment. So that's the advice maybe I want to offer, Jake.
Love it. That would truly make the world a better place. That is a great action that we can totally do this week. We do that in the next 30 minutes. We can do that whenever we have that next moment, co-create that moment. Really appreciate that. Matt, it's been awesome to have you. Before we go, I do want to send everybody a reminder to share this episode. I like to encourage people to share this episode with kind of a specific group, a specific person. I mean, today, think about those people that you want to get to know deeper, you want to have those deeper conversations with, where you want to really create those moments. Share this episode with them. So you guys are on the same page. You get the book too, of course. But share this episode with them so that you guys can both start creating those cathedrals of connection, those times where you can truly live in the moment and be connected. So you can send it to anybody, but hey, that's a good person to start with, the person that you want to connect with more. So I want to encourage people to do that. Matt Mattson, super appreciate you being on Christianity Without Compromise. We love to have you. We loved all that you brought for us today.
Thank you so much, Jake. It was really an honor being with you. You're doing important work, brother. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I try my best. This episode of Christianity Without Compromise was hosted by me, Jake Doberenz, and produced by Theophany Media, my podcast production company. If this conversation served you, please rate and review the show and share it with a friend and help others find it. You can also subscribe at jakedoberenz.substack.com to get email updates with new episodes every Tuesday and my often humorous theological reflections on Fridays. And as always, don't just listen, live it. Live out that Christianity without compromise. Thanks for listening.